Oh, look at me. Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Monday, February 24th, 2025. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. This podcast covers the national champions. You'll notice that it's me hosting today and not the dulcet tones, if you're on the podcast, or the handsome visage of Dave Biddle. Dave is off this week. Once the Reds got a new manager, Dave made plans to go see the Reds for spring training in Arizona. He is, I believe, Tito Franco or Tito something. But he is psyched, and he is out there. Dave is a big-time Reds guy, so he's hoping some of his Buckeye luck will rub off into the western part of the state, into the state of Cincinnati. But I digress. Today, we will have Mark Neal on the show. For those of you who don't remember, Mark and I hosted the Bucknuts 90 a long time ago here in Dayton. It went everywhere at the time. It was kind of the beginning of our podcast radio approach. We would do it from Roosters and such, and Mark and I have remained friends, and he is no longer in the state of Ohio, but he is a big-time Ohio guy and will provide some excellent insight on the Buckeyes and what he thought of the season and what it's like to be a big-time Buckeye fan in Minneapolis. So going to be a good time. Going to be great to check up with Mark, one of my real good friends in the business. So one guy we have to keep happy, and that's Pat Murphy. And Pat Murphy loves one thing more than anything else, and that is joy mode. Say goodbye to weakness in the bedroom with Joy Mode's sexual performance booster. It's Monday. You want to get your week off to a righteous start? You know how to do it. This all-natural supplement is designed to enhance blood flow, giving you a more reliable performance. It's not just about better sex, though. Daily use supports healthier blood vessels, boosts heart health, and is proven to improve you in the bedroom by 50% in just 60 days. Mix with a pack of water and feel the effects within 45 minutes. If you're looking to take your game to the next level, visit tryjoymode.com and use code Bucknuts at checkout for 20% off single purchases and 30% off subscription orders. That's tryjoymode.com and use code Bucknuts for 20% off single purchases and 30% off subscription orders, and tell them Big Pat Murphy sent you. All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, 15 years in the making, the reunion of the Bucknuts 90. Mark Neal is here. Mark, it is great to see you.
Oh, you as well, Dan. I used to see you every Sunday morning and then some for a long, long time. As you mentioned before I came on, man, we did that Bucknuts 90. I did it with Bax and you at different stretches forever and ever. And it was, I didn't really think about it, but it was kind of Bucknuts' first foray into what this has become here. So It's awesome to have been a part of it. And like I say on my screen there, I do feel like a second cousin, maybe once removed, lives down the street kind of guy.
So let's background Mark here and take a trip down memory lane. I know this is not your standard Monday show, but we aim to entertain. And those of you who did enjoy the show, like my guy Chris Madigan here, who I told Mark this, there'll be some guys here who remember it. So what happened was, this was a show we would do on Sundays for 90 minutes on location back in the day when people actually had to leave their house to do things. And we would do it at a local Roosters. I want to say we did it at somewhere else before that, and it got moved to Roosters. But we would do it at the Roosters, Miamisburg. We did the classic one downtown. I remember that one because our waiter had on the ankle monitor. That was classic. That was great. But it was a great time, man. It was like, and I was telling Mark, my happiest memory, the one that sticks out the most is, I don't know if you guys remember this, but when they were announcing the very first college football playoff, so this was 2014, when Ohio State had just whacked Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game. We didn't know what was going to happen. And the way our show ran, it was over at noon, right? Or it was over at 11. I can't remember.
12:30.
12:30. All right, so it was 11 to 12:30. They announced that year the four teams at about 12:40. So Mark and I had done the show, and then we were on the highway listening to the radio, and it came over. So you've got two guys driving down the highway, banging on their horns, sticking there like, we're going to the playoff. So I'll always remember that. It was a tremendous experience. Tell people just about your Buckeye fandom. You're a member of the Fairborn Sports Hall of Fame. Are you kidding me? True Dayton native. And you were the voice of sports radio in this town for a good long time. So give people your bona fides so they can know that you live and breathe Buckeyes and live and breathe with you as well.
Well, I mean, growing up in Dayton, specifically Fairborn, I mean, everybody's a Buckeye fan around there. So it's hard not to. I went to Fairborn, like you mentioned, and I'm a Browns fan. So we better get our winning done on Saturdays on the gridiron. Because not a lot's happening on Fridays and Sundays. But, yeah, I went to University of Dayton, just like you, Dan, and was the program director at WING for 14 years. And I was on the air for just shy of 20. I had my own show on that station at 22, and my wife is a very successful marketer, and she left for a job. She was been the CMO at Vivid Seats and other places like that, and so I knew I would always leave my career to follow hers, and we moved to Minneapolis, which she became the VP of marketing at Aveda, which is based up here, and now she's had some other jobs since then. But nevertheless, that's why I left. And but I was there, like you said, a long time. Dayton's oldest radio station. I was the longest running program director at WING. So long time there. And that's my hometown. I still have a home in Fairborn that we go back to. We're actually going back here in a couple weeks. So, I'm in town quite a bit, to be honest with you. We're back and forth a lot. And but yeah, of course, love the Buckeyes, talk the Buckeyes, and I missed it. That was the easiest part about the job, Dan. When you do a show like I did in your hometown, I talked Reds, Bengals, Browns, and Buckeyes. I mean, that's throwing me right in the briar patch to use the phrase.
You vent your spleen that way because what people don't know is when the show ends, you still got a lot to say. So we'll let you get some of that out today. One thing I'm fascinated by is you were here, so you know what it's like to be a Buckeye. I think when you hear Ohio State spoken outside the state, it still touches your heart a little bit. So you had to see Ohio State go through this wild roller coaster ride of a season. You got to witness the Michigan fiasco and Connor Stallions, all that from outside this, the 937 as we call it. You got to hear us referred to as the lunatic fringe. I wonder what it's like to be there and have everyone around you saying something goofy and just the general vibe of being a guy who grew up and then kind of destined to, be in another Big Ten town as all that went down. I'm just curious what that was like.
Well, I mean, as you can imagine, Minneapolis, more than St. Paul, but Minneapolis is a kind of a transient town. St. Paul, they always say, is where the true Minnesotans live. Minneapolis is where the true Minnesotans live too, but there's people that move here mostly move to Minneapolis or the suburbs. But nobody is a Buckeye fan. And Ohio State is on the radar. I mean, Minnesota and Ohio State have been in the Big Ten together for years. It's not like it's Nebraska or Rutgers that are kind of newbies. Minnesota just doesn't – everybody's like, hey, how about them Buckeyes? Nobody really hates Ohio State per se, but nobody is a fan of Ohio State. In fact, it's like Brady Hoke everywhere. They call them Ohio. Hey, are you an Ohio fan? They're just they're more worried about Wisconsin and Iowa up here, and I think that they understand. To quote The Rock, I think they know their role when it comes to the pecking order of Ohio State, when it comes to Minnesota football, etc.
As a Buckeye devotee, what was it like to see them pilloried and kind of take us back through your ride through the season? Did you expect them to win the title this season? I always predict them to win the title. I tell this joke that I grew up in the D.C. area, and Sonny Jurgensen picked the Redskins every single week for 30 years. It didn't matter who they were playing. He'd always come back to it. And I do that every year. But I'll say this year, I actually believed it. This is the first year we went into the season where I really thought, without question, they had the best team. Dave and I discussed this. I thought they had a chance to do this in 2015. And then I thought the team that would have taken on Joe Burrow but got Jeff Okudah in the semis, I thought would have had a chance. But this was really the first team I honestly believed would win the title. So it was a roller coaster ride. How about yourself? And then kind of take us back through the season, the game against the team up north, and then the playoffs. Just kind of your ride.
I knew the Oregon game could have gone either way. So you just write that off. The game was in Eugene against the team that went undefeated, won the conference. But after the Michigan game, you looked at that like as an anomaly. I didn't see that as like that was still inexplicable. We look at that loss like, how is that possible? But when they got into the tournament, and you say this a lot about the basketball tournament, you say, boy, they're going to be a handful come tournament time, especially when they got to kick it off at the Shoe. And then they just kind of came out and played like they could have. Sometimes you have to have your lowest to lows to hit your highest to highs. And that's, I believe, what happened. Michigan, I think, just awakened this, the giant, if you will. And once they got into the playoffs and I saw them play against Tennessee, I was like, boy, they're going to be tough. Because there isn't that, whatever that, the Alabama team with Najee Harris and Smith and those guys. There wasn't a team out there like that. This wasn't your typical Georgia season or those Clemson teams with Lawrence. There wasn't one that was out there just like, look, I mean, we ran into Notre Dame at the end. Good team, but, nobody was afraid of them, in terms of like you would have been some of those past championship teams. I knew if they could get that engine running, to your point, Dan, all those upperclassmen, all that talent, all that experience, it was just, if you can just point that nose in the right direction, that's a winning horse right there, and they proved it.
Yeah, it was interesting. The fact that there was no franchise quarterback out there waiting for them, like look at that. See, look at his mug. We didn't even plan this. This is just it's what happens when you're part of the in crowd. But there was no Joe Burrow. There was no Trevor Lawrence. So I really felt like if they could right the ship, they'd get it. But we'll be talking about that last game of the regular season for some time. I've told people this. I'm going to get access to the team at some point behind closed doors. And if there's ever a situation where there's drinks served or anything like that, the only thing I will attempt to find out is what the hell happened going into that game. I want someone to tell me, there's still something out there for me. I will never repeat it because it will be off the record over drinks, but I got to know that for myself, be able to sleep better. And those of you who want to talk about hoops, we will talk about hoops here. Mark knows himself some hoops, but we're going to do that at the end of the show because believe it or not, if I talk about hoops now, I will get complaints from people for talking about hoops. So what we'll do is at the end, you listen to all your football chatter, and at the end, if you like hoops, we'll chat hoops. Let's talk about the draft a little bit. You've always been good on that. Who are some guys on the team as you look at it right now that jump out to you that here's how I do it. It's great to be a Buckeyes fan. And then they say to you, okay, do you want this guy to be on the Browns and do a certain, you start to say to yourself, oh, okay. And then you realize who your favorites are. So I'll tell you this, for me, one of the guys I think has been very underrated in the process, and I am hoping lands with the correct team, is Quinshon Judkins. I think he's been devalued. Do you have any guys that you fell in love with this season that you love for the Browns? Are you IDing guys as you watch games?
I really think that a guy that could really be a good pro because he showed versatility was Donovan Jackson. With the numbers that you can have on game day, you got to have guys that can kick out and play tackle. We'll see if he can play it at an NFL level. But he certainly showed he can play it at a collegiate level. He certainly can play guard. And guys that can do that are worth their weight just because of the sheer game day numbers that you have. A guy gets rolled up on an ankle on the offensive line. Next thing you know, you're down to a number you don't want to be down to. That, is big. As far as other guys out there, some of those interior defensive linemen, the Tyleek Williams, I think, I keep waiting for JTT to just be what he looks like he could be. I thought JTT would have the ramp through the season that Sawyer did. Sawyer really was kind of like going through, I hate to say it like this. He felt like he was just kind of going through the motions, not like in a lack of effort, but I kept waiting for him to explode, and then he did. Tuimoloau did as well later on, but it's like I thought, Dan, if he would have left after his junior year, his draft day B roll would have been Penn State games. And it's like, what are you doing the rest of the year? He just has the ear, I don't know. He seems like a guy that's going to have to find a place. Is he a 3-4 end? I don't know. Maybe he's a little small for a 3-4 end. Is he a 4-3 end? Probably, but he's got to get to the quarterback a lot more than he did in college. Denzel Burke was another guy. Did he lose a bunch of money coming back?
Yes.
Possibly. Could he still be a good NFL corner? Absolutely. Just one of those guys that could come along. I do love Judkins. Trevion Henderson is a guy that if he can stay healthy. And I think bringing Judkins in, some people are like, would Trevion like that? If I was Trevion Henderson, I would have brought him in and carried him in. Running backs don't want a bunch of mileage on the legs. I mean, the days of like Ricky Williams having 700, 800, 900 carries and thousands of carries, 1,200 carries, whatever he had in college, I wouldn't want that if I was them. I haven't gotten paid yet other than NIL money. I'd gladly welcome a second running back. Think back to the early 2000s when Ronnie Brown and Cadillac Williams, I think both went top 5 or 6 out of the same backfield. So sharing carries is not going to kill you in terms of your draft stock. Both those guys will go day 2. So I what you said about Judkins, I totally agree with. Emeka, I think he could be a fine NFL receiver. I'm interested to see what he can do in versatility, how good he can be. He looks like a slot guy waiting to happen in the pros. But this team has got a lot. Josh Simmons came along. There's so many. I mean, like you and Dave have mentioned on this, and you and others have mentioned on this show in recent days. There could be a record number of guys taken, or a record tying amount of guys taken. A couple of them are certainly going to pop.
I asked that also because I'm going to read our next ad here, but I asked that also because the NFL Combine is this week. It starts on Tuesday, and I will repeat this as learning this from Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who to me is the premier media source on the draft, and we'll get him on here after the Combine. He is there now. The Combine is really set up originally and primarily for the medical testing, to get you all in one spot, and all your doctors get into poke and prod at guys. So this is a huge weekend for Josh Simmons. He's generally considered by most to be the top tackle in the draft talent-wise, and now it's just a matter of the patella tendon injury has healed and is on track. We've been told he should be ready by April, but we will see. I'll tell you what's ready, and Mark would know this if he was still here getting bennies. Factor meals have changed the TV dinner game. I don't even think you can really call them TV dinners anymore. I always cite the movie Risky Business, where Joel eats the Salisbury steak frozen to let you know things have changed. Factor meals. They arrive fresh, ready to eat in 2 minutes. You can fuel right and feel great. Lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals. They have that. They also have a randomized controlled clinical diet factor you can get. 40 options, 8 dietary preferences. Breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, more add-ons, dinners, lunches. Reach your goals this year with your ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. I'll say this. I do not like chicken out of a TV dinner. It tastes rubbery. These people have solved the matrix somehow. Chicken breast tastes delicious. I don't know how they did it. But you eat smart with Factor, and you get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your box plus free shipping. So that's factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. We actually do seem to have a lot of interest here in basketball. And like I said, we will get to that. But Mark, what are your expectations for the Buckeyes in the season they aim to repeat? A lot of different coaches, a lot of different players. I've said, hey, if you're going to start a football team with players, get Ed Reed on defense and Julio Jones on offense and call it a day. They are doing that. We mentioned how they're going to possibly break the record, or at least tie it for drafted players to around 15, when the guys who would be drafted first out of the team won't be in the draft. Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. Jeremiah Smith won't even be in next year's draft. Try and get your mind around that. That's hard to even think about. But Caleb Downs will be, if people are smart, the first defensive player taken in next year's draft. So they'll build behind those two guys. Offensive line, go left to right. Got to change the left tackle. You got to change the right tackle. What are they going to do inside? Got to replace Emeka. Got to replace both running backs. Got to replace William Howard. How did he do his quarterback here? And that's just the offense. The defense, you have to replace the entire starting defensive line. Mm-hmm. You have to replace Cody Simon at linebacker, who became the definition of a mainstay. Davis Igbinosun is coming back, and I said he needs to have the oven mitt summer of his life, so he never grabs anymore, but he's still there. So you got to replace Denzel Burke. You got to replace the underrated Lathan Ransom. All right, Mark, you're in charge. What do you do? What are your expectations? Are you going to go undefeated? It's a long season. Take the wheel.
Well, quickly, I do want to address Cody Simon, because the players like him, I think, are going to go the way of the dodo. To wait around like that, to play, the guys like Cody Simon in the future are going to hit the portal and get an opportunity to get on the field. But it paid out in dividends for Cody. Wow, you look at him, really was a 1-year guy as a full-time go starter. And had a great year, but I think guys like that will be looking to play elsewhere. Anyway, back to the topic. Yeah, you're replacing everything. Julie, you got to start with the head of the dragon at quarterback, Julian saying he is what everybody says he is. Then I can't wait to see it. Supposedly he just was way not ready to go last year, which I'm fully believe. They always say the best friend of a quarterback is a good running game, Dan. You lose both your backs. That's a big question mark, especially when you don't know who's blocking for them up front. They got some tackles, they got some line in the portal. Hintzman, I guess, would slide back in at center. They've got guys like Montgomery, et cetera. Searveld. I can never pronounce that name.
Nobody can.
I never hear it enough is the problem. I see it, but I never hear it.
So, Mark, let me tell you this. I've been doing this so long that I have to look up people's names. I have to look up Searveld and Teal. The first 20 times, I can't even say them. First 20 times I wrote them, I'm like, O-L-O. And then I go back, I look, I'm like, go back, look back. Those are Searveld and Teal. You got a master's in names if you can handle it.
Well, I learned Antetokounmpo because of his brother that went to Dayton, not because of Giannis. It's like that. So those are big. Front four.
Costas.
I think every football fan by now has realized that everything is on the lines. And to lose all four of your defensive linemen, you just can't slide guys in like that. That's a slap in the face to the experience and talent of guys like Williams and Hamilton and Sawyer and Tuimoloau. You can slide in guys. I don't know if you're going to get the same production. There's no Chase Young behind Joey Bosa in this particular scenario. They're good players, don't get me wrong. But when you have one guy in your front in the box, you have 6 or 7, depending on how you want to line them up, that's tough to replace. But one thing that'll help saying is that he's got Jeremiah back, Carnell Tate back, Brandon Ennis back. They've got wide receivers just coming off the assembly line at Ohio State. Plenty of targets, plenty of guys that will get open. He'll have time. I mean, it's not like they're putting in nobodies along the line. He'll have some time. The running game will be a big question mark. How much of a threat will it be? And that's no knock to the guys they have coming back, Peoples in particular. We just haven't seen them enough. They're the unknown quantity. To just say to run it back, it's so tough when you lose. And this is not uncommon, Dan. You see this when football teams win national titles. Guys leave en masse. You saw it with the Hurricane teams that were loaded back in the day. You saw it with the Bama teams. These teams are like, all right, I'm out. You see it in the pros when those Cowboys teams in the 90s were winning. all of a sudden guys are like, yeah, I'm going to hit free agency because they're going to pay me. And that was 30 years ago. It's no different in college sports. You got to jump while the iron's hot. Boy, I'm just throwing out every saying there is today. This is not uncommon. Ohio State recruits for these types of things. And in this era with the transfer portal, you can restock a roster faster than ever before. I think they'll be in good shape. It's Ohio State football. They win 90% of their games that they walk out on the field to play. The conference is good, but not overwhelming. Until SC gets things going and Penn State gets to be a tick more dangerous and Michigan gets back to being I know they've won the last few games against Ohio State, but I still look at them as a team that should be getting beaten every year by Ohio State, especially now with the Harbaugh regime gone. This conference is still very manageable. Of course, they open up against Texas this coming season, so it's we'll learn a lot about them. That could be a 2 versus 3 or a 1 versus 2, Dan. I heard you mention that could be a 1 versus 2 a couple weeks ago on this show. Very well could be. So we got to go.
We have to go through. Yeah, we got to go through the second portal. I don't think the second portal is going to be super impactful, but I would be hesitant to say anything with a super degree of certainty before that. Terry Slusher makes a great point. What I was going to add to yours is that there's a chance the offensive line will be better. Ethan Onianwa at left tackle has the pedigree. Philip Daniels from your neck of the woods, who's coming back home. He's a Princeton guy who was at Minnesota, should be good at right tackle. The interior 3 should be better. Those guys all have experience. That's another year in the weight room. And then the one thing I think we haven't mentioned is Max Clare, the tight end recruit from tight end transfer, from Purdue, basically Purdue's best player on offense. If you look at the all Big Ten teams, they do 3 teams. There's Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland. Those guys are both headed to the NFL, probably top 30, 35 picks. Number 3 was Max Clare. I'm not sure they've had a target at tight end quite as ready to help out a young quarterback as much as they have in the past. There's always the running joke about tight end here, and will he ever get 30 receptions? Dave used to have a running bet with the fans on that. And Ohio State really has never worked the tight end like we maybe would have wanted or expected, but the tight end can really be a security blanket for a young quarterback. Max Clare is experienced, and he's an Ohioan, so that's good stuff. All right, let's briefly talk about the basketball team. I know you do follow that as well to some extent. Are you up enough on that to chat about it, or do you want me to just take?
A little bit. I see the chatter on Twitter more than anything about just the state of the union with this team, and what Steve said the other day. Also, I did catch. So as far as the ins and outs and basket for basket, not as much as I used to. It's not as easy up here.
So I'll just hit this a little bit here, and then if people want to comment in the chat or get their comments out, that's fine. They played at UCLA yesterday. Got a chance to watch that game. There was literally not more than a 2 or 3 minute stretch of the game where I felt like they were going to win. You know what I'm saying? They kind of fallen behind, and I think you're getting into a situation here where people are going to start wondering about the coach because he's in a really tough spot. He had no experience as a head coach. He was hired in kind of a weird situation. And look, the Big Ten is no easy basketball conference. I mean, the SEC is clearly pulled out in front, but they've got a tough road in front of them. They don't really seem to have a true go-to guy. And that's a challenge. I know Bruce Thornton can kind of do that. And Junie Mobley has had some games where he's played well, but it just doesn't seem like a coherent group. I kind of feel like we're back into where we are with Mata at the end of the year when things weren't going well, where there'd be a few games left in the season and they'd be like, we're still trying to find our identity. It's like, if you haven't found your identity by game 20, you're not going to find it.
Well, this season's kind of on its head anyway, Dan. Last week there were 9 SEC teams ranked. And the Iron Bowl was 1 versus 2 in basketball. This basketball season is officially drunk, I believe, in some respects. Diebler was kind of a battlefield promotion for Ohio State. I think they wanted a little bit of continuity with his hire. Maybe he's a little bit ahead of schedule. I don't want to say over skis, because I think that's a knock about whether you are capable. I'm not saying he's not capable. I think he's a little ahead of schedule right now, as whether he should be a head coach or like a top assistant still. But yeah, this team doesn't have that guy that's like, okay, here, go get us a bucket. I was watching yesterday's game. Mick Cronin, of course, like Mick Cronin only can do. He's like, all right, anemic off it. He just, nobody has a less filter right now in college hoops than Mick Cronin. And he's like, yeah, we basically suck, but we're still winning somehow. And I think that just is like Ohio State's like, I mean, if they suck, what are we, at this point? It's a shame, too, because that program, especially with the money coming in the Big Ten, and you should be able to kind of go out and pick and choose. A lot of coaches would probably love to come here and with the financial dollars behind them. That arena, I know that arena gets beat up a lot. I have not been to that arena that often. I've heard people like Steve Hellwagon just tell me it's just not a great place to watch hoops, but it's an impressive arena to look at least. It's not going to deter recruits from coming here. Coming to Ohio State too. You can get that NIL dollar, which is what is a big factor. Ohio State has potential to be way better than they are if they get the right pieces in place. And I think that there's going to be some reevaluation, especially with a new athletic director in town that's going to want to make a statement for himself.
He did hire Diebler because he kind of took over. Ross Bjork did at the same time. I'm not sure he'll be married to that, but there's some really
he just wants some continuity, right, Dan? I mean,
I get that, but in terms of if he hadn't hired him, I would say Diebler is toast, because most ADs want their own guy in there. I want to go through some of these comments. Yep, Sage, I think everyone agrees the guards are some of the best in the Big Ten. Find a big man. Brian Emerson, no future Jim Jackson, LeBron, or Ian Fulmers in the state. Now, here's my issue with that. The best guard not in the NBA right now, the best guard in high school not in the NBA right now, is from Ohio, Darren Peterson. He's going to Kansas. And I realize he hasn't been your classic Ohioan. He played private school. I think he's at Prolific Prep out in Napa Valley right now. And he's been a franchise unto himself. He literally has his own AAU program. But if you want to compete, when a guy from Ohio comes up like this, you've got to empty out the NIL to get him. They don't come along this often. And if you're going to be in the game for guys like this, you got to get them. There's really no way around that.
Well, the Thad Matta era flourished because of a 2-hour radius. I mean, you think about whether it's Deshaun Thomas or Oden and Conley, and of course Sullinger, even B.J. Mullins, who wasn't what we expected him to be. The talent that was in a 2-hour radius of Columbus during the Matta era really was the sail of that ship for a long time. And it just doesn't seem like they're either the same amount or they can't reel them in. You can talk maybe better to that, Dan.
I think that's accurate. I mean, we like to go after guys with Ohio ties. Even Junie Mobley, who was out west, had him. And Bruce is a true out-of-state guy. But generally speaking, if Ohio has a guy like that, put it this way, they could have been recruiting Darren Peterson since he was in the 7th grade. It's not like these guys come out of nowhere. So you need to get that done. This is going to come up in every single town that needs – every Power 4 school that needs a coach is going to be talking about Rick Pitino now, because the guy is truly – now, you can say what you want about him socially or his Italian –
genius.
His Italian food proclivities. And I say that as a joke. People who know that know what happened in the restaurant late night. However, he's already passed UConn. You got a guy walking off the court at UConn saying he's the best coach in the sport. Who's already lost, and Hurley, he's lost to Pitino twice this year. By the way, I also saw Pitino say, not recruiting. Not recruiting.
High school players.
That kind of threw me there. I don't know who he's talking about, but he might be talking about my son because he has.
I was going to say, isn't the best guard in Columbus playing at Denison right now, Dan?
I don't know about all that. I will say this. Denison did win its first outright conference title ever over the weekend and a comeback victory at Ohio Wesleyan that literally took a year off my life. Trailed by 9 at the half, but they won it. The last time Denison got any portion of a title, they shared the OAC title with Baldwin Wallace in 1968. So my son,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so my son got there. They were a 5th place team. New coach. He's the only, and he hurt his knee, so he had a year off. So he's the only one who's been there all 5 years with the new coach, and they went from 5th to 1st. So I got a great picture of them hugging. Chris Sullivan, congratulations to Denison basketball. By the way, Oakwood basketball, my other son became the first ever 4-time league champion in Oakwood's 69-year history. So
I heard you mention that somebody broke Darren's scoring record at Oakwood.
So when Darren was a senior, you guys who are Dayton fans, Will Maxwell, who's on the team now, UD team, was a freshman and fantastic, and played a ton as a freshman when Darren was a senior, and then kept it going. In fact, when he was a junior, my other son started as a sophomore and broke his elbow, and then that's when he was a senior, and so they won it then. So my youngest has 2 titles where he kind of rode the Will Maxwell coattails, and then they won the last 2 years. He was MVP last year, first team this year. So, yes, if you guys see Will Maxwell on the bench at Ohio State or in the game, he is a fantastic player and broke the record. Darren broke the record. It lasted for like 60 years, and he got to hold it for all of about 36 months. So thank you very much, Will. But always great to see someone great break it. Let me tell you something. There's a kid coming to Oakwood next year who's going to be possibly the best player ever there. So remember, I said that.
There's a lot of good young talent in the Dayton area, men's and women's.
Yep. Oh, women's basketball in Dayton is tremendous. It's better than men's. That's a fact. Women,
but anyway.
The good players around here are Division I guys. It's still tough, but I digress. All right. Let's talk about one last thing to finish off here, and that is your views on Ryan Day. Where were you this season? Were you on the suspect train? Were you on the, we talked about this at how you've had people tell you that the question of the Michigan game or the title, and that's kind of how Day is going to be defined now. I mean, it's like most of the country, I think, now views him as the, winningest coach that's active. When you're ranked in something and the guys in front of you and behind you have like names like Hurley and Snapjack and like
Walter
Old
Camp.
Yeller, you know what I'm saying? You've done something. But what's your views on Day as we head into this next year?
Well, like we talked about before the show, I tweeted some things out after the championship game, and I had a Tennessee fan of all fan bases kind of say that Tuimoloau and Sawyer were losers because they never beat Michigan. And he went on to say that he would rather beat Bama and Florida than win a national title. And I grew up in Ohio. I'm almost 50 years old, Dan. I just turned 48. So I grew up in the era where beating Michigan was the end-all, be-all. And that wasn't even that long ago where it was the end-all, be-all. It can't be anymore. I'm sorry, it can't be. Winning a national title is why you play sports. It's a big goal. But Ohio State was able to reach what I consider to be their biggest goals, their two biggest goals this year, despite losing to Michigan, making the playoffs and winning a national title without beating Michigan. Beating Michigan used to mean going to the Rose Bowl. Now it doesn't even stop you from going to the playoffs. Beating Michigan is important, but it seems like we're not even head-to-head going up against them in recruiting much anymore. So beating Michigan is important, but it can't be the end-all, be-all. But at the same time, it is the way. It is a measurement of how good of a coach an Ohio State coach is. We've seen coaches fired strictly because they can't beat them, John Cooper. But that was a long era gone by. Urban Meyer, I think, changed our perception of what Ohio State football is, and it's about winning national titles. I think there's still going to be a section of the fan base where beating Michigan is the biggest thing. Hell, we sing songs about it. But winning a national title, I'm sorry, folks, that's got to be the number one goal when you're doing anything. But I digress, like you said. Ryan Day needs to figure out the Michigan problem. but he certainly has no problem bringing in talent. I think an underrated aspect of this offseason, because of so much talent going away, the underrated aspect of this season, Dan, is going to be replacing guys like Chip Kelly, replacing guys like Jim Knowles. That they were big parts. A coach is sometimes only as good as his talent and only as good as his assistants.
Speak to that. Your thoughts on Hartline? I mean, obviously you're a day guy, and speak to that. What do you think of the Matt Patricia hire?
I love Matt Patricia.
Go ahead.
I love that hire. I love the former NFL guys, because these guys all have, as you've said, Dan, these guys all want to be 3 years and out. You said that for 15 years to me. Matt Patricia can tell you how to get to the NFL better than Ryan Day. Brian Hartline, we've seen him as a play caller. I think Ryan Day trusts Chip Kelly with his football playing life. It's his mentor and best friend. Brian Hartline, I feel like he's going to have the volume a little higher on his headset when Brian Hartline's calling plays, and he might make some emendations, as they might say, as we go with play calling, just to guide him along. It won't be the same. I'm not saying Brian Hartline isn't capable. I think Brian Hartline's capable of being a head coach. I think Ryan Day's going to have to earn that Chip Kelly level of trust from him, despite the fact that he's been on his staff all these years. Chip Kelly is like a second father to him. Brian Hartline is as a colleague of his. And Ryan Day, I think, still fancies himself as a play caller. So anytime that it's like the chef handing it over to the sous chef, but every once in a while he's going to be like, hey, let me flip that real quick. You want to get in on that cook. And I think that's the same kind of thing. But I think Matt Patricia is going to be a bona fide home run for Ohio State on defense.
I agree with that. I think the Matt Patricia hire is going to end up being one they get a lot of credit for, because it didn't win the PR battle. You know what I'm saying? Which I actually like. What we know of people in the public and what we know of them behind closed doors are oftentimes not the same. I've been told that Matt Patricia extremely intelligent, and the one thing he's focused on is, and some coaches are like this, he makes the game easier for his players. I've had 2 people tell me that. I like to hear that.
Some guys, Dan, are a coordinator. Some guys are not head coaches, right, despite how good of a coordinator. I don't know that he's a communicator enough to be a head coach or a facilitator enough to be a head coach, but he certainly can be a darn good coordinator.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I even think he will be more. I think if you watch any of him at the Super Bowl week, he went down there to do some media, like everyone who needs a job. He's lost some weight. He's clearly worked on his stage presence, as it were. And I think he's going to be in tremendous shape. And like I've said, I'm really hoping, they follow the Nick Saban template here. And like you said, when you win, you're going to get pillaged. That's not a variable. Replacing those guys is vital. Urban struggled to do that.
Yeah.
He hired too many cronies.
Yeah. I think that, to your point about Patricia, just his appearance, it makes me think of Bull Durham. It's like, you can be slovenly like Bill Belichick when you've won the Super Bowls, but when you got funky shower shoes, you better win 20 in the show. That's what Patricia reminds me of. It's like, you don't have the resume to walk in like that. You are a coordinator or a head coach. You're a leader of people. In this case, a leader of men. You got to look the part. And I think he's like, yeah, maybe you're right. And I think that he's addressed that.
Well, we have addressed the return of Mark Neal. It's been glorious. We will have Mark on here every once in a while now. As you guys know, we have so much experience together. It's just like very smooth sailing. So we appreciate it. Mark will always be part of the Bucknuts family, more than a second cousin. I would say first cousin once removed.
Well, that's a second cousin, Dan.
I don't think so. They're different. Someone explained it. Listen, I once was explained the idea of cousins, and it's very hard to really understand who's a second cousin and who's a first one once removed. It is different. Those of you who want to hit Google and figure that out, we'll talk about it more in our next show. We appreciate Mark joining us. Have a good one, Bucknutters.